Hello guys, welcome to another update. In this video I'm going to talk about a couple things. I just got off work and it's Saturday and I work 6 days a week, so I basically just want to rest for a minute before I work on Galactic Armada. In this update, that's why I'm making a video instead of going to work on it, because I need to take a break from coding for a little bit and let my mind rest, and my fingers too. But anyway, so let's talk about Galactic Armada. Some of you who have followed my previous YouTube channels know that I was working on a project, and then I kind of vanished for quite a while. What happened was I got a job working with a small startup studio that's grown and has more people now. We have, animator, modeler, game designer, rigger, programmer, and I can't really tell you what I'm working on because I'm not allowed to. I can tell you what I'm working on in the sense of programming, which I'm building a template-driven animation system, a template-driven animation controller for Unity is basically my primary task that I'm working on. But anyway, so about Galactic Armada. So I want to talk about some of the core components without giving too much of the game away. And another thing is I only know what's going to be in the game for certain. Some of the things I might talk about might be theoretical, and I don't want people to get the idea that anything they hear me talk about is going to be in the game. But if I say that it's 100% going to be in, then it's probably a core component or a core feature that everything is built around for the game to function correctly. In the game, for example, one of those core functions or features is going to be there's going to be a fleet of starships that you're going to be able to grow and add ships to your fleet. But the player won't always be commanding the fleet. The fleet will have like a fleet admiral that will be driven by artificial intelligence. The fleet will be actually have a legitimate AI commanding it, and it will be making choices depending on what's happening in the galaxy and depending on what the player is doing in the galaxy, or not doing too. And one of the concepts that is inspirational to me for this game is the TV show Battlestar Galactica. And I've always wanted to play a game that puts you in the pilot seat, so to speak, of what it would be like to be one of those last human beings alive, surviving on that fleet, maybe running a fighter pilot to defend the fleet, go out, collect resources, scout, engage in combat, and rescue missions and stuff like that. Just like they did in the TV show, they did missions basically. When enemy ships popped out of nowhere, out of hyperspace, they were jumping in their ships, going out to defend the ship. When people were needing rescue, they went out and rescued them, right? So it actually is a good foundation for a video game because one, in a game you need a gameplay loop, you need missions, you need something to do during the game while the story is playing out. So the story will have a beginning and an end, but you need something to do in between, and the game needs to make sense. The gameplay loop needs to make sense within the context of that story. And that's what I think makes a really great sci-fi game in general. I think that Freelancer, the classic space game Freelancer, had an okay story. I think that Free Space had a pretty good story. That's a classic. And I really enjoyed the early X series game stories too. They had some really good stories, and I really loved those games, the X1 and 2 and 3. But beyond that, they kind of sucked. And why did they suck? And this is just my opinion, is because their story was not as good, not as compelling, and it was just a space kind of simulation without the good story. And for me personally, the game needed both components. It needed the fun combat. It needed some depth to it. It needed relatively good AI, because I don't want to feel like I'm fighting just a bot that flies around in circles, right? You want to feel like you're actually engaged uh, with, an enemy pilot that can actually threaten you. Um, and that really adds to the immersion. And so I'm all about the immersion in developing Galactic Armada. I wanted to be extremely immersive. In fact, I wanted to take that immersion to the next level. And one of the ways I'll be doing that is I'll be designing some very advanced artificial intelligence systems, very sophisticated AI algorithms that will be running that will make the pilots good, that will add depth to the fleet admiral and the fleet that you're going to be protecting. Now, another key component to this fleet of starships and the Galactic Armada, that's why it's named Galactic Armada, because there's an armada of ships. That's what the whole game will center around. Your ships will have population, and they will need things. They will need food, fuel, energy, and ammunition, and various other resources as well to sustain the fleet. And what happens is you'll be constantly under pressure to keep the fleet supplied with resources. Now, just like in the TV show Battlestar Galactica, the resources will be limited. It's not like the universe is going to be filled or the galaxy is going to be filled with resources everywhere and it's just going to be so abundant that it's not going to matter. In fact, it's the opposite of that. And the fact that resources will be rarer and harder to find, and the player will have to venture out into the game world to get them into dangerous areas, picking up new tasks and new quests and doing new missions and new side stories and things like that, that will make it fun because of that constant pressure, right? So you can't just sit around and lollygag, or your people might eventually run out of water and run out of oxygen and die. And if your people die, if it gets to a certain point, there will also be morale. The fleet will have a morale, and the morale will affect all sorts of things. It will affect the AI. It could cause an insurrection. There's going to be all sorts of mechanics I have planned just around the fleet, maintaining the fleet population and the fleet morale. There will be an alien race, an alien incursion that basically wipes out humanity, and that's how you get to the point that there's only a few ships left and they're scattered around the galaxy and stuff like that. Now, I don't want to get too much into the meat of the story in this video, but I just want to talk a little bit about my vision for the game. And I have scaled it back from my original designs. I was saying in my previous introduction video there that I wanted to build a procedural galaxy where you could just fly in any direction and warp drive out just like in Star Trek and just warp there seamlessly without going through a jump gate and without any kind of loading screen or anything like that. But I have scaled it back since then, and the reason why is because, one, I'm more experienced developer now, and I realize the task that I would be involved in trying to create that. Yes, there will be jump gates. There will be potentially a loading time, maybe not a loading bar or anything like that, but just as a very brief loading time while you go through the portal, so that it could preload all the assets in the next area and stuff like that, and set everything up in the meantime. Also, it's about resources, right? So when you have a big open world like that, there's a lot of things that you have to track in that universe, and it will definitely take CPU overhead. And also, that creates problems with your UI. How do you create your UI to track all that stuff? So it will be limited to an area around each planet. So you'll jump from planet to planet or area to area. It doesn't. Each area does our zone, just like in the X series games. Won't necessarily have a planet. It could be a nebula or an asteroid field, or whatever have you. The first zone that our star system. I'll call them zones, but really they're star systems. I'm creating is the Sol system, right? So you'll have the Earth, Mars, Neptune, Jupiter, all the planets in our star system, and you'll be able to have hypergates, and you'll be able to jump from each one to each one throughout the system. And at the Sun and probably at Pluto will be exit gates that will exit to other star systems, basically, or other areas. And then that's how the areas of the zones of the game will be connected on the grid. And so that's the next thing I have planned. I'm either going to do the hyper jump gate or I'm going to do a chase camera. I'm really thinking I might want to do the hyper jump just because I want to hyper jump to Mars for some reason. I want to set up Mars a Mars shader. Uh, I don't know if I'll use my Earth shader or not. I might just make a new one for Mars so I can make it very customized. Um, but yeah, I'm definitely wanting to jump to Mars and maybe put another couple planets in, and go ahead and set up the very basic architecture for supporting the jump gate system and the hyperdrive system too. So once I set up the jump gate system and have the basic architecture for it and how it interfaces with the vector space, in the scene, then I will do the framework on the ship, which will be a sub framework of the ship for the hyper jump system, to engage the ship to hyper jump into it, which will play all the special effects, which will engage the area loading system, deloading and loading system. So there's actually a whole bunch of different kind of frameworks that are all going to be designed with this. So it will take a little while to build the hyper jump system fully. I can probably get it functioning in one night, but I'm not going to have beautiful AAA hyperdrive effects or anything like that shader in one night. But I probably will get it where you fly into the gate and it transports you off into the other area, Mars for example, and deloads all the assets in the previous area seamlessly too, which is key, and also loads assets in the new area before you arrive. So while you're in that transitional state, it'll load and basically load preloaded assets. If it's a big asset that might put a load on the CPU, then that will probably stay preloaded or pre-cached, and then those things will load before you arrive. So there shouldn't be any issues with seeing any kind of things appearing out of nowhere or anything like that. Alright guys, well thank you for watching. I think I'm going to go on a bike ride or something, and then I'm going to start on the Hypergate system, and maybe I'll have something done by tomorrow night. And you guys have a very blessed weekend.